You might think an elite mentality is something you're either born with or without, but the truth is, it's something you can develop and build over time. Failing to build an elite mentality will mean that your career will stagnate, and you'll be left feeling like you've wasted your potential. As a mental performance coach, I help top athletes build top 1% mentalities. And today I'm going to share the exact 4-stage framework that I use with professional athletes to help them unlock their full potential. If you follow these 4 steps, you will build the confidence, the resilience, and the self-discipline required to finally reach your biggest goals. And the good news is this formula can be applied to any performance domain, whether you're an athlete, entrepreneur, or artist. This is the framework you need to build a mindset that will allow you to enter the top 1% of your field and also stay there. So let's get started. So the first stage of developing an elite mentality is the Pinnacle Assessment. This involves carrying out a comprehensive performance profile with athletes. It's a reflective exercise that involves a self-ranking and rating process to identify all the essential components that go into building a top 1% mentality. And the key thing here is that I force athletes to be hyper-specific to both their sport and even position. It's not enough to be vague, saying things like, I need to be more resilient. Instead, I want to see my athletes say things like, I need to be able to instantly emotionally detach from missing an easy shot so that I can take the next one with killer instinct. Those who go on to build a top 1% mentality only get there by doing top 1% stuff. And the first example of this is demonstrating that level of hyper detail. If you come up with general things, you will only ever have a general mediocre mentality. And the key with this first step is to list literally anything relevant. You will know your performance domain best. If you are struggling to come up with some ideas, then you may find some inspiration from reading through my free guide, Winning Thoughts, which details 50 key lessons that need to be learned by any athlete in order to become a peak performer. You can download it using the link below. For now though, let me give you some general examples just to give you a little bit of an idea. It could be pushing myself to train with higher intensity even on the days that I'm tired, or not letting the fact that I've been benched let my training standards drop, or be able to go into every game knowing with complete certainty that I will score the most points for my team. And typically you want to write a minimum of 10 things, and if necessary, go up to 20. From there, it gets a little bit more complicated, as I would typically now run through a ranking and rating process with the athletes that I work with one-to-one. This allows us to work out at this point in time which 3 key factors are the ones that, if actively worked upon, would give them the best chance of dramatically improving their mental game. But if you want to do this yourself, a simple prompt is to just look at this list of 10 to 20 things and then ask yourself the question, which of these 3 factors, if actively worked upon, would lead to the biggest improvements in my mentality and performance levels? Typically, some key things will stand out, the ones that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable because deep down you know that you're lacking on them. Trust your gut with this and don't overthink it. Finally, the end result of this performance profile is then setting a short-term goal related to each of those 3 key factors that you have identified, as well as then mapping out a few key actions related to each of those goals in order to make the desired improvements. So for example, if being able to go into every game knowing with complete certainty that I will score the most points for my team was one of your key factors that surfaced after doing this ranking process, then a definitive goal for a basketball player could be, I will get to a place where I am 100% confident in my ability to score a minimum of 20 points per game, even after I have games where I score less than this. Again, the key thing is that with such goals, they have to be hyper-specific. These goals need to be meaningful to you and are things that you're able to concretely reach over a 2 or 3 month window. Anything longer is too far away and you will lose motivation. And then the same goes for the actions to reach this goal. You want to list out 2 or 3 key actions that need to be taken in order for that goal to be reached. And this is where I typically come in to make specific suggestions of psychological tools, techniques, and strategies for the athletes I work with. If you're unsure about this, you have 2 options really. 1, actually apply for my coaching program, Peak Performer, or 2, think about the goals that you've set for yourself and then go through my channel page and watch some videos that you think seem most relevant to the goals that you've set, because chances are in those videos, I've discussed specific tools and techniques that will help you with that issue. After you have these actions and goals written down, you have a complete plan now on how to build an elite mentality. All the foundational work has been done. You then just have to go out and execute. And this takes us on to phase 2 of our framework. Elevated expertise. This phase is all about equipping yourself with a personalized set of mental skills, techniques, and strategies that will be the key to elevate your performance to new heights. And so what this looks like is diving into the actions related to the goals that you set in the previous phase. And it's important to note that this phase is all about education, because first and foremost, building an elite mentality is about educating oneself on the tools that allow for this to be built and then applied on a regular basis. This phase requires a lot of patience and trial and error. Much like training a new physical skill or practicing a new training drill, things won't click immediately. And the same goes for mental skills. They can be unfamiliar. You will experience uncertainty in applying them, but the elites stick with them. And these are what then allow them to build that mentality that they need to unlock peak performance. So depending on the goals and actions you've set, you may need to learn and apply some new self-talk techniques, some visualization, some relaxation techniques, or just improve your ability to regulate stress and arousal levels in ways that actually facilitate performance. It will vary massively depending on your performance domain and your current circumstances. But let's say, for example, that you're a fullback in football who has a goal of being more intimidating when they face off against dangerous wingers. It may be that one week you spend a lot of time learning about grounding techniques such as reset buttons, positive mantras, and box breathing so that you feel 100% confident in your ability to contain any form of attacking threat and become someone that wingers actually hate having to play. And then the next week, you may focus on reaching one of your other goals related to being more brave in decision making. So the actions related to that may be about just educating yourself more and growing comfortable with risk taking so that you can then more consistently execute ambitious passes, runs, and dribbles. My role in this process with athletes I work with is to just keep them on track by only focusing on the things that truly matter and are going to be most effective for reaching the goals that they've set for themselves. I will also share simplified explanations about these tools and techniques that are tailored specifically to their sport and situation, as I know that navigating this on your own can be quite difficult. But if you are doing this on your own, my best advice is to only focus on one thing at a time until you feel completely comfortable with it. Sometimes it might take 2 or 3 weeks to really get a good, solid understanding of what a specific mental tool is and how it should be applied, and also why it's important to do so. Again, mental skills training is just as hard as physical training. You don't get a six-pack from doing a set of crunches once, and your mentality doesn't become super chiseled by learning about and applying a mental skill once. And this application part ties into phase 3 of building an elite mentality: accelerated action. So this phase really coincides with phase 2 because each week, alongside elevating your expertise, you've actually got to put things into practice and apply them. And again, the key within this phase is as much specificity as possible. After learning about a tool or technique, you need to actually write out a clear action plan of exactly when and how you're going to use it. And the first recommendation for this phase is to try out these skills during practice or training sessions. You don't want to try something out for the first time during an actual performance. Instead, you need to rehearse these skills, really become familiar with them so that you get to know them in terms of how they feel and the actual impact they have on you. So going back to our fullback example and his grounding techniques, after learning about reset buttons, to accelerate his action, he needs to, 1, plan out what possible reset buttons he can use. And just for context, if you didn't know, a reset button is any action that allows you to reset your body and mind during a performance, and they're typically used after mistakes, errors, or a few bad minutes of play. So for our fullback, this may be having one physical reset button, such as a quick pull or retie of the laces in his shorts, and then also a mantra reset button, such as next one. He then needs to plan out what specific moments he would intend to use these reset buttons, such as a winger beating him, mistiming a tackle, committing a foul, or screwing up a cross. And then he needs to actually practice these in training. Before each training session, just before he puts his phone away, he needs to quickly remind himself of these reset buttons that he's written down and look at these on a notes page on his phone, and then actually also look at the situations that he plans to use them. And then finally, he needs to review the use of the reset buttons. After each training session, write down a few bullet points of when the reset buttons were used, how easy were they to use, and what impact did they actually have on performance? Did they calm him and ground him as desired, or was he still on edge after using them? And then after this, there's always 2 options. 1, either keep repeating the cycle of using such reset buttons until they become habit, or 2, if they didn't feel quite right, think of some new ones and try those ones out instead. This specific and structured approach will ensure that both the learning and application of new mental skills is as fast and effective as possible. And it is this phase that is by far the most important, because you can learn about all the mental tools in the world, but if you don't consistently practice and apply them, all they're doing is just taking up space in your brain. It's like buying a set of weights and just letting them gather dust in the corner in your garage. You've actually got to lift them to build muscle, and the same goes for mental tools. You've actually got to practice using them on a daily basis in practice or training, and then eventually apply them to game days in order to build your mental strength. An elite mentality only comes from action, so keep getting the reps in, otherwise you won't make the mental gains that will actually allow you to finally become a peak performer. A big thing that helps with this for my athletes is a sense of accountability. So I will help them form their action plan for the week, and then I'll actually communicate with them every few days on WhatsApp just to check in, and so that they can have instantaneous feedback and just make adjustments in how they're actually using techniques. And you can do the same with some other accountability partner, whether that be a teammate or a family member. Having someone to just check in on you and say, look, did you do what you said you were going to do? That is a massive motivator to just keep you on track. stop any excuses from occurring, and just ensure as much action is happening week in, week out. Because building elite mentality can only happen through the support of others. All of us are naturally a little bit lazy and will try to get away with doing the bare minimum because it's far easier to let yourself down than it is someone else. And it's also important to have someone there to actually just call out your bullshit from time to time and also just make you reach for higher standards. Accountability is simply one of the best accelerators, so make sure you build some of this into this phase when you try it. And then lastly, our final phase is knowledge consolidation. After 2 or 3 months of repeating through the weekly cycles of phases 2 and 3, you will get to a point where you have been able to tick off all the goals that you initially set for yourself. You will become more confident, more resilient, and more motivated if you have consistently learned, applied, and then integrated each of these mental skills into your approach as an athlete. But you now need to make sure that such changes are permanent, because it's very easy for us to fall back into our old habits and ways after a major milestone has actually been reached. Building an elite mentality is actually the easy part. Sustaining it is the truly difficult thing. So in this phase, it's all about refining and integrating all your newfound knowledge, skills, and insights into a permanent performance system. This is what is going to ensure that you are empowered to sustain peak performance indefinitely. And so what this really involves is doing a reflection on each of the tools and techniques that you have learned and applied. And in its most simplest form, you should just sit down and run through these 3 questions for each of the tools that you have applied. 1. How well have I gotten to know this tool? Here, write about your true understanding of what the tool is, the appropriate situations to use it, and also how confident you are in your ability to use it correctly. And then 2 is how effective has this tool been? Here, be more detailed about specific instances in which you have used said tools and reflect on whether using them actually led to success. Have you been able to get over mistakes quicker? Have they made you feel more confident, more fearless, or more disciplined, etc.? And then question 3 is, does this make my mental toolbox? Based on your answer to the previous question, you need to just give an honest assessment as to whether you feel that you should keep using this tool to sustain an elite mentality. We're all fundamentally different as performers, and this means that some tools will have worked perfectly for you, and some may have not been actually that helpful. Some will have clicked easily, and some may have been a lot more difficult to integrate. But that's fine, and goes back to the point earlier when we spoke about trial and error. The whole point of this is to find out what works for you and what can be reliably turned to in order for you to perform your best. For some people, that might be reset buttons. For others, visualization, and for others, pre-performance routines, whatever. And then some tools just don't make the cut. That's completely fine. There's no need to clog up space in your toolbox if you're never going to get it back out again. And then once you've done that for each of the tools, it's a good idea to write them down into a simple Word document or notes page on your phone that you can keep coming back to. So just write out a simple what, how, why for each tool. What it is, how you use it, and also why you use it. Having this in place allows you to keep coming back to these whenever needed. It may be that some of these tools only need to come back out again during a dip in form or after a period that's had several bad moments. So you want this easy to access reference file to just quickly get you back on track with using the tools that will help you feel your best mentally. And there you have it. You've learned the 4 steps necessary to build an elite mentality. The hard part though is implementing these and also knowing exactly what tools to use. So to help you think through the best mental tools for you, then you should check out this video next.